Hey everybody, welcome to this New Year's episode of one of my data podcasts. So I'm going to upload this to all the data podcasts, so that way everyone can hear it. But bottom line is, what I want to talk about today is just things that I'm looking forward to in the year 2025, whether it's things that I'm working on or just things that I'm interested to see in the industry as a whole. So I guess I'll start off with things that I'm working on real quick. So in January, there's already a lot going on. I will be doing several different virtual speaking events, where I'll be talking a lot about, of course, like things like Iceberg. Also going to be doing some new presentations about Dremio and some of the really cool, unique things about Dremio. And a lot of the unique things are the things that it brings together sort of into sort of one platform, versus, getting a lot of things, a piece here, a piece there. Some of the when you put it all together, you get these nicer benefits. And I'll post a link in the video description where you can find all the different speaking events I'm doing. You can also subscribe. It's a Luma calendar. So you can easily subscribe to it and always be aware of sort of when I will be speaking, whether it's virtually or live. I will be speaking live in New York for a new series of meetups. Well, it used to be called the OSS Data Deep Dives. It's now going to become the Apache Iceberg Ecosystem Meetup. And where basically we'll have people from across the Apache Iceberg ecosystem talking not just about Apache Iceberg, but things that are Iceberg adjacent, whether they be catalogs, different tools that work with Iceberg, and things like that. And I'll be speaking there specifically about the future of the REST catalog spec, particularly the scan planning endpoint, which is always one of the newer proposals for the REST spec that I find particularly interesting, that really kind of opens up the door to, Iceberg tools being able to handle multiple table formats, being able to optimize scan planning in new ways and things like that. So if you want me to hear me go into all the technicals about that, do be there in New York City. I think it's going to be like the 21st off the top of my head. But all the event will be in the episode description. So make sure you're there. Don't miss it. And it's going to be pretty cool. We're also going to have Danica Fine from Snowflake, who will be talking and giving everyone a nice level-setting introduction to Iceberg to kick off the evening. And we'll also have Ciro Greco, founder of Bauplan, talking about Python and Iceberg. So do be there for that. That'll probably be the place to be in January. Now, also going on is I also have a couple more. So you guys know I'm one of the co-authors of Apache Iceberg, the definitive guide from O'Reilly. And I will be announcing one, maybe two new book projects over the next year. So keep an eye out for that. So if anytime you feel that I'm quiet, it's because I'm writing. And there's a lot to write. There's a lot of stuff, really interesting stuff kind of going on in the Lakehouse space right now to talk about and give people sort of, good resources on. But on that, I'll be doing what I usually do, creating videos, books, podcasts, whatnot on the Data Lakehouse space, and helping you guys stay in tune and stay on the pulse of what's going on in this space and how to think about it and how to make your, plan accordingly for that. Now, as far as things that I'm excited to kind of see, as I kind of alluded to, I'm excited about the scan planning endpoint and just a lot of the changes that are coming to Iceberg over this year, whether it is the adoption of possibly deletion vectors, the adoption of, what's the term I'm looking for? Geographical data types, variant data type. These are some interesting things that really open up some new possibilities, and also just some improvements in performance. Because, for example, things like the variant data type is basically like JSON plus metadata. And that metadata allows you to kind of traverse that JSON structure, that semi-structured object, much more quicker, which just, again, will make using JSON or semi-structured objects within your Iceberg data just a lot more performant, which will be pretty cool, especially since so much data nowadays does have some aspects of nested JSON or semi-structured data. Other really cool things are just kind of seeing what's going on with the calendars, not the calendar, but the catalog space. I mean, you have Apache Polaris incubating, you have Apache Gravitino incubating as Apache open source Apache projects, both really taking some interesting takes on a lot of things, trying to see different sort of Apache Polaris managed services prop up, whether it is Snowflake's open catalog or Dremio hybrid catalog, which is currently in private preview, but I'm sure there'll be others. But of course, what's pretty unique about the Dremio option is that it's hybrid. So for those of you who have on-prem tables, that's definitely something to look into. But otherwise, there's a lot of inertia for Apache Polaris already. And of course, when you take a look outside the Iceberg ecosystem, there's a lot of, things like a Unity catalog that are doing some interesting things. And because Databricks did acquire Tabular this last year, I'm really interested to see if we're going to start seeing the early sort of offshoots of that acquisition. I mean, right now, so far what I've seen out of that acquisition is mainly the people who used to work at Tabular doing much more pro Databricks type LinkedIn posts, and basically some encouraging of adopting deletion vectors in the Iceberg, which I think that's actually a good idea. I think that actually helps everybody in the sense that it does sort of two things. One, I think deletion vectors, the way it's currently proposed for Iceberg, is sort of a improvement upon the previous way row level upserts were kind of handled, where basically you had different different delete files, and you'd end up with like a lot of different delete files, and you have to read all those delete files, versus kind of having it all within your puffin file as a binary blob, which will be these deletion vectors, which essentially will be arrays of the things that were deleted in one place, making it where there's just less files to read, and the file you do read is binary, so it's a faster read. So I think that will be good. And again, because it's going to be a similar abstraction to what Delta Lake does, it does improve sort of interoperability. Again, I think that's sort of where you're starting to see some of the influence of the acquisition happening. Not so much like people keep talking about like an Iceberg Delta merger. That's just not going to happen, because you have a PMC on Iceberg that is from many different companies who have many different interests outside of the interests of Databricks. And the majority of those PMC members weren't Tabular employees, and they aren't. And for those who are now Databricks employees, they still don't make up a majority of the board. Nor do those particular people do I feel like they would want to just sort of just merge the two things. What I do think. And plus, again, and Databricks wouldn't have an interest in merging the projects either when you really think about it, because the reason why Databricks likes having Delta Lake is that it's nimble, because they control it, they can change it to adapt to their product quicker. Okay, so they're able to sort of move quicker because they control the format. But other people like Iceberg because the format isn't controlled by everybody, or anybody. So it moves slower, but it allows everyone to sort of have sort of certainty and sort of where it's going and all these things, and allows other people to, especially other vendors, to be able to know exactly, hey, what are they building around and what is going down. So what I would expect you will see, and for the most part, the verbiage, that I hear from all parties is just still, where basically more collaboration between the two communities for both formats to adopt the best ideas from each other, and overall probably become much closer to each other, but not still one project, because Databricks is still going to want to have a version of a Delta format that they have sort of very high influence over, because they want, so that way their product can be nimble, okay, and they're not necessarily slowed down because they're waiting for a particular feature to be adopted in a format or something like that, waiting for the community to catch up to what they want to do, and then Iceberg doesn't want to have, a single sort of body that kind of dictates how the format evolves, when the different communities and different, interests have different ways they want Iceberg to evolve. So I don't see any reason for a merge. I do expect that Iceberg will continue to have the momentum, just because it does basically, once you go outside of the Databricks ecosystem, that's where a lot of people have really invested in as platforms to support, pretty much for the exception of like Databricks and Fabric. And even Fabric has started making moves, like little tippy toes, using Xtable towards Iceberg, but again, there's a history there with Microsoft and Databricks that makes perfect sense why Fabric would be very Delta oriented. But I do expect that you're going to start seeing a lot of that sort of those movements between both formats, where they're again adopt the best ideas from both of each other, both become better formats, and maybe become easier formats to switch between. Okay, making a lot of those tensions a lot less. But again, I do think a lot of that will eventually be solved by that scan planning endpoint. So again, when you see my list of events, go check out that scan planning endpoint. I'll talk all about the details of that there. But overall, again, I do expect that the sort of the trends you've been seeing already, that more and more the momentum is going towards Iceberg. A lot of people, the interest of Iceberg is going to continue to grow. But now you're going to start seeing a lot more interest, less in sort of what is Iceberg. You're starting to see this in sort of how do you implement Iceberg. And that's probably where you're going to start seeing a lot more of my content go towards. Less on sort of like, hey, what is Iceberg and how it works. More on, okay, hey, you are now moving towards Iceberg. What are the things you have to think about and do? And what are the different components you need to put together and whatnot? So expect a lot of blogs and content in that direction. Continuously trying to help you sort of navigate that Lakehouse world and get those Lakehouse benefits. Again, if you haven't followed me on Blue Sky and Twitter and LinkedIn, do so. I'm not hard to find. I'll also include those links for this episode's description. But otherwise, I will see you all in 2025 for some very exciting times, for a lot of very exciting content. And again, also be sure you're keeping an eye on the Dremio Lakehouse platform. A lot of really cool stuff going on there. Won't get too deep into it now, but definitely make sure you're following me so you can hear those updates. In case those particular sort of really cool announcements are things that solve use cases that you have. But otherwise, I'll see you all in 2025.